Thanks, John, for inviting me here. It's great to be here in Athens for the first time. I'm a corporate lawyer. I'm a partner in an international law firm, and I've been interested in crypto for a long time. I'm a startup lawyer, and I work with a lot of different emerging companies, across a lot of different subject matters and verticals and fields. And I think that one of the things that started to interest me more about crypto and blockchain was trying to figure out how I could contribute, how I could participate. You know, if there's anything I can contribute. And what's really nice about this movement towards decentralized finance and decentralization and blockchain is that it's pretty multidisciplinary. There's a lot of contributions that you can make because it's as much sort of a social phenomenon and kind of changing the way we interact and the way we think about our different roles, as it is also a way to transact more efficiently and without intermediaries. So one of the things that I noticed is happening in crypto is there's a bunch of different interesting sort of areas of interest for lawyers in crypto, but as a corporate lawyer, I don't deal with privacy regulations, it's not my specialty. We don't deal with intellectual property considerations, which is also a very interesting area, especially with NFTs. But I do deal with putting together organizations and entities and figuring out how they can grow, figuring out how to structure them, figuring out how you can try to incentivize the different stakeholders to participate, try to sort of maybe, to structure the system in such a way that certain preferences are protected. And I think crypto and the field of blockchain is starting to really deal with this a lot by virtue of the organizations that are sort of managing the rights relating to sort of these digital assets and crypto assets and tokens through DAOs. And that's something that I thought was really interesting because it's really sort of a evolution in the way we are organizing ourselves to create businesses. And recently, there's some legislation coming out of the state of Wyoming, which while it didn't necessarily change so much things, and you could probably even contract to get to the same place if you wanted to already. It represents, in my mind, sort of an evolution. So the way I sort of look at the history of why we have corporations is that at some point it made sense for governments to allow people that are working together to say, look, if we work together and you register and you label it a certain way, you can limit the responsibility that you have or the liability that you have to the amount that you invested inside it or to the assets of the business. So they can't come after you. This is what's called a limited liability corporation, and this is called like the fundamental innovation that allowed is the reason why you have corporations. This is the real big change. So before that, the default is if you're starting an organization with somebody, and me and John start something together and we don't register it, you don't have to write anything on paper. By default, in many jurisdictions, you guys are partners. We're just business partners, and that means that if we decide that we're working together, then and John does something and suddenly we get sued, I can get sued also because we're partners, and our liability I'm not protected. So they created this corporate structure, and and over time there was sort of a theory of how these bodies should work. I'm not gonna bore you with exactly like how all the way a corporation works, but in 1977, in the United States, there was a unique development that doesn't really exist, to my knowledge, doesn't exist in Europe at all, doesn't exist in Israel, where I also have some legal experience, which is sort of this hybrid, this kind of free type of corporation, because part of the trade-offs you have when you decide to get this liability protection is that you have to conform with certain structures. You have to file some kind of report. You have to decide who is going to be on a board of directors, and the directors have things to do. But then they created something called an LLC, and it came actually out of Wyoming, interestingly enough, because Wyoming also kind of innovated right now recently with a recent law relating to DAOs. And what the LLC said, in short, is that you can have the protection of the corporation, but you can have this flexibility of the partnership, where you create some kind of agreement that kind of deals with sort of like taxation for among partners. This is the tax corps, I'm not going to really deal with, but it's very, very free rules about how you can manage yourselves. You can have a manager, you cannot have a manager. You can structure it in a very, very open and free way, and there's a lot of flexibility there. And this represented sort of this big, it made things a lot easier. And in fact, most businesses in the United States are incorporated like this right now. They're structured as LLCs. For other reasons, sometimes the structure is very important. So, if you're looking for, venture capital investment, they say, look, we want this structure. But you can see this movement towards being a more open structure. And you see this kind of blending of these roles. It's called, what they call the LLC was like a hybrid structure. And now, what's really interesting in what I'm seeing from the outside, kind of looking in as not a technologist, when you look at blockchain, is you have this other structure, which is kind of managing the role of the rights relating to tokens, of maybe the token economy, of how you vote on decisions, on maybe making updates to the software that's managing the token economy and decentralized applications. And this is really what a DAO is. And there's some automated functions also that are related to this, but it's really kind of another progression in this way you can organize yourselves. And what I think is really interesting about this also is that now with DAOs, it's kind of doing an even, like I would say, a very dramatic blending of what an equity holder is, what a member is, what a partner is. Because suddenly you can be playing a game, and suddenly you have rights to vote. Suddenly you're kind of an equity holder. So suddenly you're a consumer, but you're also a stakeholder, and you're also an equity holder. So it's really, really interesting, and these incentives are all you can find new alignments. And I think that's also a really, really interesting thing about...
It gets even more complicated when all of a sudden you start getting dividends. Like you start playing a game, and all of a sudden somebody gives you dividends. You're like, And then you're like, if you sell this, you also make money, and then you can vote about how this works. So you're a consumer, you're a shareholder, you're the CEO or at least the decision maker. Like things become like all the lines become a little bit, blurry, which is a regulatory, at least in Europe, is going to be a mess trying to figure out what constitutes an organization or even a security. And we are seeing this with the NFT because the NFTs are tokens. Is digital art? Is it royalty system? Is it dividends? Is it I think it's going to be extremely interesting how this will be approached in the US. But how Wyoming did? What is the thing that they did with the DAO? What did they decide?
So in Wyoming, they decided that you can, when you're forming your LLC, you can form a DAO LLC. You can form an LLC. You can choose to incorporate your DAO so that you have the liability protections that an LLC has.
So that means that I could. Do I have to be a US citizen or resident to register a DAO in the state of Wyoming? For example, can someone here from Greece register a DAO in the US?
I have to check this, so I don't want to say for sure, but from my understanding, I don't think you have to be a US resident or citizen at all to register a DAO LLC. Typically, you don't have to be a US citizen to form an LLC. So I don't think that this would be any different.
that could be an interesting way for people in Europe creating crypto companies in the US, because there is no regulation here, who knows what's going to happen in the future. That might be a super fast way to do something in that space.
It could be nice, and it could be helpful, I think, for especially for if you're kind of worried about some blowback on when you're registering, tokens and minting tokens and issuing them. Obviously this liability protection is a way to sort of mitigate your risk, and and you don't, and when you're forming this LLC, the one that the person or entity that's forming the LLC doesn't have to be even a member of the DAO. It doesn't have to be part of it. It can be separate, the person that's forming. So I think there is benefit, from a liability perspective, to do that. But it also is creating a little bit of noise at the same time, because there's this weird sort of in the middle state that you have with DAOs. You're saying, well, it's not really necessarily a security, but when you're kind of registering it, then of course it seems to be coming. I'm not going to say for sure exactly, because like you mentioned, this is really a regulatory nightmare.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crossing a lot of these boundaries that were once kind of very distinct, and the roles and the protection that you have as a consumer is different than the protection that you or like a retail investor versus an accredited investor or a consumer. It's all getting blended together in a weird way, and either you can say you're subject to everything, which would be very, very cumbersome, of course, or you can find some pathway so that these structures are, because the whole idea here is the DAO is super flexible, and if you start saying, well, it's so flexible that it's subject to all the regulation, then it's kind of losing a lot of it's losing its advantage.
I have a question that some NFT artists ask, and I know we have a couple of NFT artists in the audience. What happens if I sell my NFT, somebody buys it for $10,000, which is a good problem to have, but whatever, somebody buys it, and then another person buys it again. I collect the dividend, I collect the royalty, 10% every time this gets resold. Am I a security holder? Like, I'm just an artist. I sold this nice piece of art, and all of a sudden I have regulators telling me that you have stock in a company because I kind of make money. Is it, based on your opinion, is it like collecting royalties from music, or is it really a security? Like, I created a new token, I created something that people can trade and make money with.
The answer with respect to tokens in general is, I think there's a big question mark. It's yes, and there's a question mark if there's some no's out there. For the most part, this is kind of the rough short part. But I would say that with respect to an artist that's creating an NFT and is sort of receiving payments relating to this digital asset, this is in my mind, it looks far closer to the no security category than other tokens, because you're not really, this is your work, and you just happen to be receiving some kind of residual payment or residual benefit from the from the resales of it. So it's not the same, but who knows if you can attribute this benefit to the tokens, sort of the inherent characteristics of the token, and there's arguments that you could make otherwise. So it's tough. There's a big question mark around this, and this is this sort of like very, very beautiful sort of bundling many different roles, many different hats quality that you have to these token economies and ecosystems, but that also pose a lot of question marks.
Oh, yeah. And another question is about specifically DAOs. I don't know if everybody knows what a DAO is. I know a couple of people might not know exactly. So DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization. It is an organization where you don't know the other shareholders. They vote about specific issues altogether. There are specific rules per DAO. For example, you could say this DAO makes decisions only when 30% of people are available to vote, and only when 60% of the votes go towards one direction. So it's a very strange democracy that is 100% decentralized. For example, and it's easy to create. The smart contract is extremely easy to make, and more importantly, there are services where they offer all these almost for free. So like, let's say we have a DAO, like Orpheum, the sponsor has a DAO and says, okay guys, look what we're going to do. Actually, that's a good idea. Load it down. You're going to load it. I know you're going to load it. So you're like, we have a DAO that everybody votes every week. Who is getting a bonus or who is getting something based on performance. So only the people that participate in the DAO vote, and they could even put more money to the DAO to do something bigger. For example, they could say we have a DAO that has $5,000 by the company and by the employees, and every year we go all together for a trip, and people that decide where to go are the participants of the DAO. So maybe half of the company says we have to go there, the other half says we'll go there, and all together at the end of the year, they use this money to go on vacations. This might not seem something crazy the way I describe it, like it's okay, it's a voting system, but when you can sell your shares to somebody else, you can add money, the whole DAO could buy other assets and bring them in. There are DAOs for NFTs. Like they go together and they buy NFTs in bulk, and that's how they create wealth for all the shareholders. And then instead of you going around and trying to buy stuff, you have the DAO buying stuff for you automatically. So all this is definitely the future because it's super hot right now in the US. Like it is even hotter than NFTs, whatever that that means right now. But everybody is talking about the DAO revelation, the DAO apocalypse, like a new system has been created where people create more wealth and more companies. The main concern, of course, is, as Darie was saying, is regulations, like who are you, what happens if I talk with the other people in the DAO, we get all the money, we'll go vacations at my family's hotel. So there are issues that are very difficult to address. Happens with all new systems, but what I wanted specifically to convey to everybody is here that it is a very strange structure. Like it seems a little bit strange how you create and do stuff with smart contracts, and down the regulatory part in Greece, in Europe, is eons behind of what's going to happen in the US. But if you have the opportunity, look online for smaller DAOs, bigger DAOs, and invest a super small amount. Don't do anything stupid. $10,000 to this DAO. You're going to lose it 100%. Just invest something to see how it works, how you vote, how you withdraw money, how you put money. Maybe you make money, but 99% you're not. But it's extremely interesting. I'm part in a DAO called One Honey, which is you work for the DAO, you do some stuff, and they pay you money that you can use. You can convert them to Ether, and they do better websites for the platform, they do events for the community, and I just like to participate because there is like 2,000 people, and they have a forum, and they talk, and they vote. And it reminds me a little bit of ancient Greece, where people work and they exchange goods and they build something bigger. So if you haven't used a DAO, definitely look around or try to find a DAO about NFT or a DAO about your art. You will definitely find like-minded people that could help you build something bigger. So after this parenthesis for people that were not familiar about what the DAO is, I want to ask you, have you ever heard, has anybody of your clients approached you about building a DAO or something like that, or it's still too early for people to thinking about how to register something like that?
I haven't built a DAO for a client yet. I haven't been approached by clients to build a DAO because I think, it's not to say that I don't think that other lawyers have built them, but I do think that it wasn't viewed as legally as it is now becoming in the past. It was viewed as sort of like a piece of code that was kind of very like kind of like a technical problem of how to kind of make decisions, and it wasn't viewed as a way that you're kind of managing assets that's similar to or making decisions similar to the way corporations act, similar to the way nonprofit or associations act. So I think that we're going to see a lot more of this. I think we're going to see also DAOs that are not necessarily driven by, that are not necessarily part of the token economy, like this concept of a sort of, this anonymous, decision-making process and this sort of governance. I mean, there could be spillover outside of blockchain as well, because if once it becomes more efficient, I think one of the issues in that I think there are in a lot of DAOs so far is that it's not really completely decentralized. Is that a lot of the functions, you vote on some stuff, but at the end of the day, another organ is really making the decisions. Another committee that's kind of off-chain is making decisions. It's not completely decentralized because it's not completely efficient that way. It's not completely trusted. So this is still kind of early days in understanding, and you can see a lot of parallels to corporate law and how things have kind of evolved also from a legislative perspective. Also, another real interesting parallel here is to constitutional law, to constitutions, to see how does it work when you want to suddenly amend a constitution, when you want to amend the constitution of a state, or you want to, because I think that DAOs might be even more similar as they can be to corporations, they may be even more similar to governments. Because in a government, suddenly you have this purpose, you have this kind of set of rules that you don't expect are going to change, but suddenly find out something's not working. Usually in a corporation, you have enough flexibility, it's centralized enough that you can really make things happen. But democracy is far more decentralized. I mean, at least theoretically more decentralized. And then suddenly you get to these states where, there's this dramatic inefficiency where you can have, like the current rules may be very unpopular, but it's very difficult to change them because the threshold required to change a rule is very hard, and the process required to change a rule. So in DAO, sometimes you don't even have this process, and some later DAOs have process for changing the DAO. So changing it, this concept, that's something that I think is one where I think sort of like there is sort of a very legal aspect. So I think that's going to become something that lawyers will be able to collaborate with technologists on doing, hopefully.
Yes. Hi. It's very interesting that you mentioned about decentralization for DAOs, because I also mentioned it for DeFi. I wanted to ask something about NFTs and IPO specifically. So you know that an NFT essentially points to a hash that has next to the signature of the original art that it represents. So there is this dispute right now that the owner of the NFT is essentially the owner of the hash and not the owner of the digital asset. And what's your take on this?
This is first of all, this is not the. Fortunately, I'm too specialized that I can't say that I know enough about copyright law to really say the answer. But I can say that it's an interesting point where you're talking about what. I mean, I think who owns the location of the art itself? I mean, you're saying that you own the hash and not you don't own both the hash and the location of the art and the art itself. And
Personally, I'm in favor, okay, of course. But I've heard there are many legal other specialists that claim that there is a gap there in IP law because actually I will repeat what I said before, because you actually own the hash of the digital art, and not the ownership, the legal ownership. You don't have the legal ownership of the digital art itself, unless it has been also explicitly sold. But this would take place from another channel, not through the NFT transfer market.
Yeah, I think that you bring up, I can't answer this question, unfortunately, but I can say that this brings up a very important point about these marketplaces in the first place. About how the terms of use and the licenses and the rights that are being transferred in these marketplaces, how important it is to structure this, because it is complicated. And also, I mean, another copyright issue is that you don't really know when you purchase an NFT if the creator even had the rights to the original artwork itself, which is another issue that comes up. But I think that again, this is super new, and the terms of use and the terms and the license that's being granted by the creator when it's being minted and being sold, this is something that is also evolving over time. I think that, definitely I think marketplaces are capable of transferring all the requisite rights to the extent that the creator has the rights. If you don't have the rights, then can't transfer it.
Yes, Yanni?
Hello. There was a recent drop of the Snowden NFT. I don't know if you saw that. And there was a call on Twitter that let's form a DAO so we can now beat everyone. And out of that, many anonymous members and some with their names formed a DAO and bought the NFT. How this can stand as a legal thing? I mean, if there is a DAO with people owning a certain piece of art, an NFT, we don't know them at all. No one knows them. What happens if someone from the DAO wants to take a legal action, say?
Legal action against who?
Against the other member, for example.
Good luck.
This is right. Well, it's going to be hard to name them, but I think that if you want to take legal action, the question this is exactly what this Wyoming law, this amendment to the LLC Act in Wyoming is really addressing, which is the sort of protection you have as a participant, as a member of a DAO. So if you have some kind of liability protection, you cannot be held responsible for the decisions you're making by voting. Saying like you vote the wrong way, you make a decision the wrong way, your liability is limited. Of course, if you have a special role, this is something that's going to have to evolve, just like it evolved in the world of corporate law. If you have a special role or a special responsibility, sort of a fiduciary right or responsibility rather, towards other members of the organization, maybe you can your protection can be pierced, and you can be held responsible. I think the general rule would be, to the extent that you are properly contracting or properly, maybe I guess in this case incorporating your DAO, your members will be protected. But I guess the flip side of this would be if you didn't create this liability protection scheme, either through registering an LLC or through contracting it in, then what is this DAO? Is it a partnership? Well, if it's a partnership, then maybe you could be held responsible. It's going to be hard to find you, but I think that and maybe the harm you cause, the liability you have, maybe minuscule. It's hard to prove, but you're not necessarily protected by virtue of the fact that you're just voting.
interesting times. So be very careful. Before I said participate in a DAO, be very careful. When you participate in a DAO just for fun, just in case. If we don't have any other questions, I want to thank Darie from Flying from Los Angeles to be here with us.
Thank you.